Happy Monday, everybody. Clearly I'm not feeling well because I'm not there today. Um, I have a fever. It's terrible. But hey, I'm here virtually, coming through the screen. Um, I have my headphones on if you're confused about why I look the way I do, because it has a nice mic on it. And yeah. So, hopefully at this point, attendance has been taken, everybody's settled in, and I will let you guys go ahead and work on your journal entry. Now, your journal entry today is why was Napoleon so interested in conquering most of Europe? Why the conquering, right? Why going around declaring all these wars? I think he fights like 7 of them, if I remember correctly. It's a lot, right? So I will give you guys however much time you need to work on this and chat about this. So go ahead and resume the video once you are done working on it. So pause now, resume once you need. Okay, so we're back, and I got my dog. She is wearing her jammies for pajama day. They are plaid jamos. She is fat, and she is cute, and she is a 10-month-old Australian Shepherd. There she is. She's got a stupid head, but it's cute. Alright, I will put her down so I can be your teacher. Okay, so hopefully you've had enough time to talk about the journal entry, so we're going to go ahead and get into it today. I would get out a piece of paper, some notes, whatever you need. I think there's Chromebooks in the back if you need Google Docs to finish with what you started last Friday. Pause if you need time to grab your stuff. And we're going to get right on into it. So let's get started. So last Friday, we talked about domestic policy. And we mentioned a few things about domestic policy that are pretty important. The first deals with religion. The Concordat with the Roman Catholic Church is crucial because it helps explain why Napoleon is so popular with the sans-culotte and with a lot of the other members of the middle or upper middle class, because he brings back Catholicism. After the cold de-Christianization movement, Catholicism was sorely missed. It kind of helps structure daily life, root people in a lot of tradition. And Napoleon understands the importance of it. He brings it back, while also at the same time allowing for that kind of enlightened toleration and the supremacy of the state over the church. Now, the most important thing to know about Napoleon's domestic policy, if you will, is the Napoleonic Code. So put like 80 stars around this one on your notes. This always pops up on the AP test. This always is talked about. People make connections to it all the time. And what this is not only is it unifying the code of law, so kind of like basic things that happen throughout all of France and all of the kind of conquered territories, but it also is important because it gets rid of social distinctions or gradations. This is a fancy way of saying it. It ends all legal differences in social class. So this means no more serfs and no more nobles wherever Napoleon goes. For that reason, a lot of people say Napoleon is pretty revolutionary because he's kind of changing social class everywhere he goes in Europe, and he goes places. It also undoes a lot of advancements made by women. You can kind of read about some of these in your textbook if you're curious. I would kind of make yourself aware of this. It is kind of a move back for feminism and equality. It definitely is rooted in a lot of kind of these old school traditional values. And so, although it does progress people socially, it sort of also undoes some of these sort of more high-minded liberal elements of the Enlightenment. So Napoleon is taking the elements of the Enlightenment that the poorer person would want to see, but not always the elements of the Enlightenment that a minority group or an effective minority group like women would want to see. The last thing we chatted about was suppression of dissent. And this was crucial because it's sort of like Napoleon being a dictator and going back on those enlightened values of free speech. So I wanted you guys to kind of take a moment to talk about what is nationalism. And I'm sure you've heard this before. If you haven't, I don't know where you've been. So this is such a crucial element to understand Napoleon. So go ahead and pause the video if needed and take about just a few minutes to talk with one another about what is nationalism. What's it all about? Go ahead. Okay, so we're back. I don't know if you can see her, but this is my cat Phoebe. She is cute and generally perturbed that I'm doing this right now, so I will let her go so that I do not get scratched. I'm kidding, she would not scratch me. She's kind of a ham. Okay, bye, kitty. All right. So, I hope you had a good discussion about nationalism. It's such a fun topic, right? Uh, so Napoleon really uses nationalism to fuel a lot of his foreign policy here. So let's talk about foreign policy. What does he do to kind of get out there and spread French rule? For the record, I do think nationalism might be a great answer for your journal entry, right? Why does Napoleon have all these motivations to go out there and conquer all these places? Well, it kind of proves to the French people that they're the best. And as long as he keeps winning battles, keeps conquering places, it kind of cements his position as emperor. So, Napoleon, up until about 1807, because remember he's put into emperor as 1804. He gets involved in quite a few wars here. He loses at Trafalgar to the British, but he doesn't really see it as that important, right? Because he doesn't have any plans to invade Britain. It's going to be too difficult. And because he's so involved in wars in Europe, he kind of pulls France out of the Americas. As many of you hopefully know from U.S. history, right? He sells the Louisiana Territory to Thomas Jefferson to get crucial money to fund his wars. And one of the, if not the first, or maybe the only, I don't remember, slave revolt to result in a kind of massive success happens in the colony of Haiti. French slaves revolt under the leader Toussaint Louverture, and they create a brand new country called Haiti in 1804. They use a lot of Napoleonic principles, despite the fact that Napoleon is actually trying to put down the revolt. Right? They're literally using the Napoleonic Code. They're saying to the end with these social distinctions, right? Break the bonds of slavery. But yeah, Napoleon is trying to keep them, so it's sort of a catch-22 there. So also on top of that, Napoleon kind of succeeds in taking all of Central Europe. With the Treaty of Tilsit, a lot of his gains are confirmed in a lot of these other countries. And boy, is he involved in countries. Let's take a look. He owns Austria, Germany, kind of the Low Countries of Belgium, Netherlands. He's conquered Prussia, and he's conquered Poland. So with all these big gains, he establishes something called the continental system. This is a really crucial idea because it's perhaps the first time Europe is ever united in kind of one big union. Now, it's nothing like the EU, the single market, the League of Nations, but it is really the precursor to a lot of Europe cooperating in kind of one big scheme. The continental system has very few rules about it. The big core concept is that there will be no tariffs for France to trade with all these countries you see over here that are in kind of the purplish blue. So France has a huge economic boom off of this, right? Because now all of a sudden, all of the mercantilist policies of countries like Austria and Poland and Prussia break down, and France is able to kind of get free trade with these countries. At the same time, all the countries in the continental system cannot trade with the United Kingdom. Now, the reason why this is a big deal is because it means the UK has no access to anything in Europe, supposedly. In reality, the continental system is broken on a daily basis. Even traders within Spain and France and Denmark and Norway and Sweden and Prussia, they'll all have some success, right, with breaking the blockade and trading with the United Kingdom. But it does indeed hurt the UK's economy quite greatly, and it definitely makes them frustrated with France even further. You might notice that there is, particularly, one country that kind of stands out here in the continental system, right? It makes sense that UK isn't part of it and France can't invade them. But you might notice that it's kind of silly that Portugal is in this alliance with Britain and they're getting away with it because they're connected by land to France. So Napoleon realizes this exception, and he's sick of the fact that Portugal is actually helping the United Kingdom keep kind of a constant harassing of the border between Portugal and Spain. British troops have sort of filtered into Portugal, and they're kind of staging these attacks all the time against Spain. So what's Napoleon going to do about it? So to deal with kind of the ongoing issues, lots of things happen, right? First of all, there's this issue of all of these different countries who are frustrated with the continental system. They rebel against Napoleonic rule. A lot of places like Prussia largely hate Napoleon, but they do love a lot of kind of Napoleon's expressed interest in nationalism. So they kind of take this idea from Napoleon and kind of make it their own. Because of the Napoleonic Code, they abolished serfdom, they reformed their army and government, and actually, as I don't know if this is definitely not intentional, right? But it actually makes Prussia a much stronger country. Also, unlike Austria, Prussia stays out of war with Napoleon from about 1807 to 1813. So they have about 6 years to build up their military. Austria does not do this. Austria goes to war like a bajillion little times, and it weakens the country greatly. Meanwhile, there's that whole Portugal issue, right? So Napoleon will invade Portugal. There's this general in Portugal who's giving him a lot of trouble. It's this British general by the name of Wellington, and he's a pain, right? The Duke of Wellington is the worst. Napoleon can't stand him. He's the only general who is able to kind of give Napoleon a fair fight. So when Napoleon moves his gigantic 200,000 strong army into Spain, he realizes that a lot of Spain isn't super into that. And a lot of kind of Spanish rebels start heckling his army, giving him trouble, burning some of his supply lines. So Napoleon says, screw this, I'm going to put my older brother to be the new king of Spain. And on top of that, I'm going to start crushing these rebels with force. So Napoleon actually is also kind of the inventor of guerrilla warfare. His term actually comes out of this situation going on in the Iberian Peninsula, because although there's battles right between Portugal and Napoleon, right, the Napoleon's armies kind of fighting these British troops and Portuguese troops head on the border, there's also plenty of little skirmishes throughout all of Spain, right, where the army is sort of occupying. And because he has to spread his army thin to kind of put down these rebels, it actually really weakens his army. He loses a lot of men in Spain. So he's got to get pulled away from Spain when Austria attacks in 1809. The good news for Napoleon is the Austrians are kind of crappy. They're really weak. They win like a crucial battle, which makes Napoleon look bad, but then Napoleon comes back and beats him up. So, because of the fact that, I think my slide might be cut off here. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna fix that. All right, that's better. Before I think the slide was kind of cut off at the bottom. So, because of the fact that the Austrians kind of do win a kind of crucial battle against Napoleon, Russia all of a sudden feels that maybe Napoleon's weaker than people think, right? All this war in the Iberian Peninsula, the fact that the Austrians actually beat them in a battle. I mean, the Austrians did lose in the end, but they did, win a battle, which is kind of big. No one wins battles against Napoleon. The dude's a genius, right? So Russia leaves the continental system in 1810, and Napoleon kind of sees this means the biggest trading partner with him now leaving and kind of joining up with Britain. This is scary to him. Now, this doesn't mean Russia plans on declaring war on France. But Napoleon says, like, look, this is one domino falling, and next thing you know, they're all going to start falling. So he invades Russia by declaring war in 1810. Everything's going fine and dandy. His army is just walking through Russia, just crushing Russians here and there. He has a huge army of hundreds of thousands of troops. But the issue is the Russians won't give him a fair fight. they keep kind of retreating and doing something called scorched earth tactics, where they will set fire to their farm fields. Now, back then, really how an army supplied themselves is they would actually usually steal, right, from the farmers in a country to feed their armies. And so when all these farms are set on fire, I mean, yeah, this is going to be bad for Russia in the short term, but it'll totally deprive Napoleon's army of a chance to kind of find food. And so a lot of people start starving. Eventually, he makes it to Moscow, and he takes the city, and he has this big bloody battle called the Battle of Borodino that he wins. But then the mayor of Moscow is given orders to set the city on fire, and the Tsar refuses to give up. And Napoleon's like, what the heck? What am I going to do? Chase the Tsar into the Ural Mountains and into Siberia? This is ridiculous. So he tries to leave Russia. And he says, I'm out of here, right? This is a hot mess. And the entire way back to France, it is now getting into kind of early winter. A lot of the Russian serfs actually started attacking Napoleon's army because he didn't free them when he came in. He actually broke his own Napoleonic code, and he believed that if he freed the serfs, they might actually rise up against him. It was quite the opposite. In reality, if he had freed the serfs, he might have actually had a chance here. But because he kind of went back on the code, a lot of those serfs felt betrayed by Napoleon, right? They hoped that maybe Napoleon was their savior from all this kind of Russian serfdom, but nope. Napoleon was just another terrible invader, and so they kind of harassed his army the whole way back out of Russia. And because of starvation and the freezing cold and the harassing kind of serfs, he comes home with a fraction of his army. Now Napoleon's weak, and everyone in Europe knows it. So Prussia, Austria, Russia, and Great Britain all get together and invade France as a team, and it works. They take the city of Paris. They capture Napoleon outside the city. He concedes the throne, and they restore the Bourbon monarchy. They put this guy named Louis the 18th in charge. Yes, they put another Louis in because that's worked out great in the past, right? And they exile Napoleon to a little island off the coast of Tuscany, which is central Italy, right? And called Elba. And he's never heard of ever again, right? Psych. Okay, so what really happens is pretty funny. Napoleon, while he's left at Elba, they let him become a governor of Elba. And next thing you know, he's like industrializing this tiny little island. He has like an army built up. He's like got like a brand new social system. He's got like all the. It's hilarious. Like he just like runs this little place like a dictator, despite having so few people. And so eventually, he convinces some of the Elbians to kind of jump on a ship with him and invade France. And he's got about 700 guys, and they go and invade, or maybe less than that. I can't. Maybe it was 70. But they go and invade France with one ship. Yeah, one ship. So they show up in France, and the army is sent by Louis the 18th to come capture him again, right? Because the kind of Louis the 18th, he's like, get this Napoleon guy out of here. So he meets up with the army, and the army's like, Napoleon, surrender. And he says, no, shoot me if you will, shoot your emperor. And then all of the troops are just like, oh, Napoleon! And they march with him, and they depose Louis the 18th. Louis the 18th has to run away to Austria and Prussia, and he has to be like, oh my god, Napoleon's back! And so now everyone has got to invade France all over again, because they only exiled him to an island over by Italy. So before all this happens, kind of while Napoleon is stuck at Elba, there's sort of this treaty sorted out. And because Louis the 18th is in France, they actually let France kind of join in on talks because they see him as kind of a conservative monarch. But now, that Napoleon kind of kicks out Louis the 18th and comes back, he redeclares himself emperor. The talks kind of cease immediately, and Austria, Prussia, Russia, and Britain realize that they got to break up this quadruple alliance to go invade France all over again. This is called the 100 Days, because Napoleon will only be emperor for a kind of a period of 100 days between March and July, or March and June. He gets involved into like this kind of big military campaign. He gets a lot of troops to join up with him. He tries to divide the British and Prussian armies in half, and it almost works. But unfortunately, because of a combination of things, including mud, yes, the weather played a kind of big role in the battle, he is defeated at Waterloo. Which is perhaps one of the most famous battles of all time. You've probably heard of it before. Great movie on Waterloo. They actually have like this scene in the movie where there's like tens of thousands of people on horseback like running around. They actually use the Russian military for extras in the movie. It's great. I wish I could play it. Napoleon is now exiled to Saint Helena, and he will die there. So they do finally get rid of him, and you're like, why didn't he do it all over again, where he like runs away? Well, let me show you where Saint Helena is, and you will see why Elba was an easy place to get back into France from, but Saint Helena is not. So Elba is like right here, right? It's just off the coast of Italy. Let me grab my pointer here. So like Elba is like here. So where do you think Saint Helena is? Well, St. Helena is over in the middle of the South Atlantic. It's one of the most remote islands in the world. So Napoleon spends the rest of his days on this tiny little volcanic island in the middle of the ocean, and he gets sick, and then he dies in 1821. He dies alone in isolation. To this day, you could still kind of visit the house he was locked up in if you want to fly to St. Helena, right? A volcanic island in the middle of the Atlantic. What the heck? So, Napoleon's legacy, right? Well, one big thing about his legacy is now all of a sudden Europe is getting really used to working together with one another, right? The Quadruple Alliance actually encourages Europe to resume kind of these diplomatic relations that had once happened at Westphalia but had broken down, right, in the late 16 and early 1700s. Something called the Concert of Europe is formed. And it's really made up of all of the big important members of Europe. There's 5. It's the 4 of the Quadruple Alliance plus now France, because now France is a conservative monarch, Louis XVIII, and they're willing to let France back in again, right? And the interesting thing about the Concert of Europe is all of these countries, Prussia, Russia, France, Austria, and Britain, all have conservative monarchs at the head of their countries. However, you are like, wait, Britain's constitutionalist. Yeah, but they didn't have a Napoleon situation, right? There is still kind of these class divisions in Britain, and so they kind of aligned themselves with these other conservative monarchs. So everywhere we go kind of in Europe, there are reforms because of the Napoleonic Code. They can't bring back serfdom, right? That would not go over well. So pretty much every country where he invaded, except Russia, where he did not free the serfs and paid the price for it, the effects of the Napoleonic Code linger on. So if you're wondering when does serfdom end in Europe, here. The only countries that have serfdom after the Napoleonic Wars, after 1815, are Russia and a few Eastern European countries. Some areas of the Ottoman Empire as well. On top of that, Napoleon kind of proves that nationalism is a heck of a force to play with, right? And Romanticism kind of fits into this. This is this art movement that kind of picks up on a lot of nationalist themes. And, nationalism stirs up some big moods, guys. And it'll kind of be an important force in Europe over the next 100 years. So the Concert of Europe is pretty successful, basically until the outbreak of World War I. There will not be another large-scale war in Europe. So there seems to be this trend here, right? Whenever all of the European leaders get together in a big conference like Westphalia or in the Congress of Vienna and the Concert of Europe, they actually seem to be able to secure kind of continent-wide peace. And then usually, after about 100, 150 years or so, there seems to be this pattern where the peace breaks down. Right? So we had war all over Europe during the 30 Years' War, and then we have war all over Europe during the Napoleonic Wars. So who was that man, right? Who is this guy? So I want you to kind of finish up today by having a conversation about Napoleon. Talk with the people around you for about a few minutes here about whether you see Napoleon as a heroic leader, a brutal tyrant, or a visionary reformer. So go ahead and take a few minutes to have a discussion with the people around you. And if you have fallen asleep, I'm sorry, I was boring. It is now a good time to wake up. Go ahead, discuss. Okay, so make sure you're ready to kind of talk about this and defend your positions on it once I am back at school, which I hope is tomorrow. However, if I have a fever tomorrow, then who knows? I'm pretty bummed about this too. So I was gonna have an informal quiz with some questions, but depends on how much time there is. So if there isn't a whole lot of time left in the class period, what I would say is at that point, go ahead and work on blue sheets and all that jazz. You know what? Actually, let's just do that anyways. Who needs the quiz, right? So let's kind of let you guys finish up your blue sheets, work on those as needed. Um, you can use the ebooks with the Chromebooks in the back. You could use my textbooks in the back of the bookshelf as needed. We could save the informal quiz for tomorrow. We'll do the kind of informal quiz talking about writing and all writing related things tomorrow. Okay? Cool. Thanks for tuning in to my virtual lecture. I hope it wasn't awful.